Barbara?
Mr. Secretary, I'm sure both of you have watched this week the use of social networking unfold on the streets of Iran. And I want to ask you about that, not from the standpoint of the politics going on in Iran, but social networking as a tool, given some of your previous government jobs in the information business. What do you think about all of this? I mean, it certainly must strike you that social networking, regardless of the mechanism, impacts decision-making, speed, national security. A lot of people say that it's something to be considered these days.
I think one of the more significant developments in the last 20 years or so has been the advance of communications technology in the hands of average citizens around the world. There is no question but that the easy availability or the easy access to Western communications and media played a part in the collapse of the Soviet Union and the liberation of Eastern Europe. It is increasingly difficult for an authoritarian government to maintain control of all the means of communication that are available to its citizens, and especially when, I mean, you either have economic stagnation and backwardness, or you allow modern communications, and it makes the control of communications by a government extremely difficult. And frankly, I think it's a huge win for freedom around the world, because this monopoly of information is no longer in the hands of the government.
So when you look at a country like Iran and the government there right now, which is clearly trying to control modern communications, will they succeed, do you think? And how do you think about this in terms of U.S. national security? Is it something that we need to take into account in this country?
Well, I think, frankly, the freedom of communication and the nature of it is a huge strategic asset for the United States. And without being specific about Iran, there are clearly a number of governments around the world that try to control these communications, that try to control the internet and so on. And I would just say I think their efforts, while successful in some respects, they just can't draw the net tight enough to stop everything. And you know, if you can't text, then you Twitter. And you know, my guess is in some of these countries that that the leadership is kind of like me. They don't have a clue what it's about.
Well, I want to ask you both that, because I mean this with all respect. Do either of you have a Facebook page? Do either of you actually Twitter yourselves, or does your staff Twitter for you?
Absolutely not.
Well, actually, I do.
He's more technologically advanced.
But let me just, if I can, take a crack at part of what you asked about, which is the speed issue, because I think the speed of communications and information for in lots of domains, but let me talk about security, creates a flexibility and an adaptability. It meets needs for flexibility and adaptability, which we have to have in our forces, first of all. Secondly, I think our force, whose average age is 20-ish, 20, 21, you know, this is how they live. It's what they've grown up on. And so for leaders, I mean, I'll take myself in particular, I think it's really important to be connected to that and understand it, certainly not be as facile as they are on it, but to understand, because I think communicating that way and moving information around that way, whether it's administrative information or information in warfare, is absolutely critical.
I would just add one point, and you know, what Admiral Mullen just said, I think, is absolutely critical. So what I have been saying in terms of our hiring a new Assistant Secretary for Public Affairs in the Department of Defense is, and when I have talked to people and when I interviewed Price Floyd, the key issue that I have been after is we have 2 million people, most of them in uniform, most of them around the age that Admiral Mullen described, and how do we communicate better with them? How do we get reactions from them to things that we're doing? How do we get better plugged in with what they're thinking? Also, in terms of our strategic communications, that's the age, or if not younger, of many of the people around the world we are trying to reach, and how do we reach them in a way that they understand? And this department, I think, is way behind the power curve in this, and it's an area where I think we have a lot of room for improvement.